Brand Innovators. Real quick intro about AdMix, if you aren't familiar with us. We're a pioneering platform that's bridging the gap between gaming advertising, gaming and advertising, which is driving the in-play movement, integrating data driven ads, which are available programmatically via IAB standard sizes and product placement. And most importantly, they're non-disruptive into the gameplay experience, meaning that your ads are not displayed, the ads are displayed within the game experience, not the annoying rewarding ad or disruptive ad that you can't close. Anyway, Courtney, Ruffles has been out of consumer marketing for the past 10 years, but brings back great memories of campaigns like you just mentioned, the Ruffles have ridges.
Good Courtney, ours, Marty. Good
Thank you. And Courtney also used to live in Chicago, she said, and she's a huge fan of Annette's ice cream, which is literally a block down from my house and where I am right now. So we had some good shared experiences when we were chatting.
I think basically I was in Chicago. I was telling everyone before you joined, I was in Chicago working for Pepsi for about 3 years before this, and then spent, about 10 years on and off in Chicago. And so I think the joke here is, Marty, we have probably run into each other, I'm gonna say like hundreds of times, and we have not known it. And now we're reunited here. So
exactly.
we've got some fun times.
I probably passed you when you were in line getting ice cream with the kids. So Courtney, we talked so much about the fact that Ruffles has not been super active over the past 10 years. And it's a really exciting time for you and have been spending a lot of time the past year in getting ready, I think, in terms of really 2022 and defining the brand. What have been, the three biggest challenges over the past year as you have been bringing, have you brought Ruffles back into the spotlight after being gone for a while?
Oh gosh, just three, Marty.
Just three. Well, you can go on further if you'd like, but I figured
I could talk about this for a while. And it's ironic. I was actually just looking at the calendar this morning. It's essentially right at my 1 year mark on this brand. And when I reflect back on the journey we've been a part of, it's just truly been extraordinary. But if you would have asked me if I would have liked to have repositioned such an iconic brand and one of the best in our PepsiCo portfolio during probably one of the craziest years of all of our lives during a pandemic, I would have said no, and you're crazy that anybody would want to do that. But I think it's been a blessing for a lot of reasons. I think one of the biggest challenges I think we all face when doing brand repositioning is how do you reposition a brand in a way that's both timeless and timely. And so I think the timeless aspect, regardless of what's going on in the external environment, is pretty straightforward in terms of the methodologies and how you talk to consumers and examine your rich history of where you've been and where you want to go. And so that, I think, whether you repositioned a brand a decade ago, today, or in 10 years, that formula works. I think the timely part of it is what was challenging. So much is going on in the world, and when we talk to consumers, which is, Ruffles is a consumer first brand, and we pride ourselves at PepsiCo as one of our guiding principles of always being consumer first. You have to tease apart what consumers are telling you because of what's going on in the world as you think about repositioning. And so I think the biggest challenge was just thinking about that. What is the timely way to relaunch this brand in 2021? What's the timeless truth that's gonna set the foundation moving forward? The second thing I would say is consistently reminding myself and my team that a brand repositioning is a marathon and not a sprint. And so it's that classic, you got to walk before you can run. And the Ruffles brand, and I saw, Marty, you probably saw all the ridges and things coming through in the chat. Ruffles has ridges. Ridges are our #1 product attribute. And, candidly, it was a marketer's dream, and it is a marketer's dream to work on a brand that has a product attribute that is such a strong equity that can stand for so much more that we just haven't unleashed. And so restraint is the name of the game that my team and I are constantly playing, because there's so much we could do and so much we want to do, but you don't want to come out the door with everything all at once. And how do we lay the story and the chapters with this brand so everything builds from a choreographed perspective? And then third, The biggest challenge, and I hope most of you will agree, definitely drop in the chat if you have any tips on this one. Just with all of our day-to-day lives, working virtually over the past year and a half, and navigating that, because as marketers, I get a lot of my energy from other people. A lot of our aha moments on brand building have been in in-person work sessions and whiteboarding and building off each other. And we've done a great job of replicating that virtually, I think as best we can, but I think you'll all agree, when you're together, that energy and the human connection, whether it's in front of consumers and consumer research groups, or it's at an experiential event, that we do as part of being the official chip of the MBA, or it's with my awesome agencies and teams and media partners in the office. The magic happens, I think, when you are face-to-face sometimes. But again, we've made it happen virtually as we can. But I think that was a challenge, is to try to create the best attributes of those in-person sessions and bring them virtually to reposition this brand.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. It's probably a big challenge to do when you're all not in the same room together and all being, virtual. Complete side question. With the pandemic and everybody being home more often, did you happen to see an increase of consumption by consumers during this period when they're all home?
The short answer to that, this is another one I could talk about for a while on how consumer trends and behaviors have changed, but absolutely. And I think it was, again, one of those things, we were repositioning this brand, and one of the benefits of doing it at a time when consumers are home more is we had, some consumers that haven't really been a part of the Ruffles brand and family for a while, trying the product and getting reintroduced as we're repositioning, which is always a marketer's dream again.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And, again, as we talked about Ruffles being out for a considerable period of time, a decade, which is a long time from a brand perspective, I think one of the things that we talked about, which was really interesting because of the tone that you have decided to take, but things have changed a lot, not only in 10 years, but also within the past year and a half with the pandemic and now where things are. But also, as Abby, mentioned at Verizon, is, we've got TikTok, we've got, the metaverse, we've got all these different channels now that are much more active from a consumer standpoint. But more importantly, I think the tone that a brand takes is so much more relevant today than it ever has been before. While it's always super important, I think there's so much more you can do with it, but at the same time, you have to be so much more careful. So I think it's like a double-edged sword almost. How did you decide on the tone of the brand? I mean, because this is a huge undertaking, and how did you really decide which direction to take it that would really be relevant to your consumer base, yet engaging enough to excite a new generation of Ruffles consumers?
Completely. And I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record today, the number of times I'm going to say consumer first, because it really does start with our consumers. When I came on the brand, we were about halfway through a really robust consumer research plan to chat with our consumers, to pan social media, just to gather as much data as possible on everything, how they are experiencing our product, the equities we have, all those great questions I put in the chat with you. I think listening to the consumers, I think going deep on the occasions, like when do consumers consume our product? What is that eating experience? How do they think about it? Are we meeting expectations? Are there unmet expectations and needs? And then also looking at our equities. What do we stand for? What's an equity maybe we haven't really tapped into? Again, our ridges that I talked about a second ago, which is the biggest. Taking a little side note here, the biggest problem to solve that our team has been rallied around is our number one product attribute is ridges. And Ruffles is a brand that people love the product, but they don't love the brand as much as they should, and as much as we should be building with them as marketers. And so I think it starts with the consumer, and again, that timely, timeless element. And as we really dig in, we're a snack brand. We're part of the snacks category. We're part of the subcat of potato chips. And this is a fun category. If you look at our history, Ruffles marketing has been fun. It's been light. It's been humorful. You look at the time that we're in when we relaunched this brand with our first campaign in March, the world was heavy. It's still heavy. And we'll talk more about, tone as we look at, chapters 2 and beyond. Because chapter 1, it needed to be light. It needed to have that humor. And that's really our foundation. That's our true north as Ruffles, but we know we can stand for more. And again, we'll talk about that more later, but I think that's what you saw come through. We had a big idea of own your ridges, and ridges are what make Ruffles Ruffles and you. And what makes you, it's a spectrum, right? It can be funny things like our very first chip deal athlete that we signed the beginning of last year, Anthony Davis. What makes Anthony Davis him? It's his unibrow. He owns it unapologetically. It's funny. You look at T-Pain and some of the other examples we did. It's funny, but it hits on our #1 communication objective to truly define ridges and to set the foundation. Again, it's in chapter 1, this marathon, not a sprint, of where we're going with this brand.
By the way, my wife makes fun of me because not only do I not have a unibrow, but I have baby brows. I have no eyebrows. My wife endlessly harasses me.
I think that's a future opportunity in some of our content for you.
So, listen, I think, thank you so much for sharing that. I know that it's such an exciting time to be a part of what you're doing. You're just laying the foundation now for what is going to be, again, a marathon, not a sprint, which is a great vision. And I think it's so important that, brands know this, but I think it gets lost so many times that if there's not a consistency with your message and your programming and your partnerships, that you can't just jump in and out of things because consumers, they catch on to that. You've got to have that ever persistent messaging and brand messaging. One of the things that we also talked about that I think everybody would love to hear is, while there have been challenges in each organization, there's certain nuances from a brand marketing perspective in selling up. How did you sell up to senior leadership when you decided on the tone and you decided where you're going to go? What were the challenges when you were selling that brand vision to leadership?
Yeah, absolutely. Before I answer that, I just want to hit on the consistency note that you mentioned, because it is so true. We often, I remind my team and they remind me the attention span of consumers and just how to build a brand over time. And we do have this tendency, I think the consumption of media keeps getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And some of those trends we've heard on other panels today, when you're really building a brand to be an icon like we are doing, that consistency is key. And that comes back to that restraint messaging I was talking about earlier. But yeah, leadership challenges. I think with this repositioning, there's a lot of typical challenges when you're repositioning, selling the story, anytime you're designing, implementing, and executing a new strategy, how to go about that. I think what I found that was really unique with this is the need for me to sell a story and a vision, because like I said, there's a chapter 1 and then there's a long-term chapter. And how do you, again, during a pandemic, how do you sell that this is the right time to do this with this brand versus waiting? One of the benefits of working at PepsiCo is we have a vast portfolio of brands, as everyone knows. And that challenge, it's continually, what's the prioritization of each brand? What's the role they play? How is Ruffles different from our other snack brands, other brands in the portfolio? And so for me, I think the biggest challenge was, again, just really painting that compelling vision. And I think I would just, give as advice to others out there is look at case studies of other brands that you admire. How have they done that over time? To just looking at, again, what are some early wins that you can get? What are some things I want to test and early wins kind of in year 1, but then again, what is that vision? For us, it was, okay, we're going to introduce bridges, then we're going to do more with them and make sure it's not only, hey, here's what I want to do now, but here's where this brand can go and here's what I need. And so I think that was what was really unique to this, is it was, a brand that really hadn't had a lot of marketing activity over the last decade. So it's a blank slate, white space, and which is really exciting, but also really challenging as you think you need to tell the whole story, not just a chapter of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you're basically starting over, but with, again, an iconic brand that you have the history that you still want to represent in some way, but yet take it to the next level. And I'm sure it presented quite some challenges. And the process that you went through with leadership, was it a long process? Was there pushback on any directions? Did you have to shift a little bit in terms of what your vision was compared to their vision, so you could create that shared vision?
Absolutely. And I think, one of the things I will say, when you have such a great marketing opportunity like we did, with a foundation of ridges and ruffles with ridges, and a big idea that really was scalable, it was an idea that traveled, it makes the whole process easier. I think, the challenges, the biggest thing I spent a lot of time on is just, how are we going to measure this, right? Because performance marketing and measurement is everything. And that's what we all stay laser focused on. And it's challenging in a pandemic year as well. Like we talked about, there's so much noise in everything right now. If you look at shopping trends from in-store to e-commerce, and if you look at media consumption, a lot of those trends have been amplified by the pandemic, but certainly there before. So I think the biggest thing that I got pushed on, that I worked on, are what are those KPIs? And there's standard KPIs that we all use for every campaign, all of our media, et cetera. But my team and I really, we double clicked on that and said, but what else are we going to gain from repositioning a brand? And so again, as the official chip of the MBA, there's a certain level of talent attraction. Is Ruffles going to be able to procure different and not better, but just different and kind of higher caliber talent, partnerships, cultural opportunities, et cetera? Then also just looking throughout, at the end of the day, we're in the business of selling chips. So if we look at our customers, by building this brand and repositioning in a different way, what customer opportunities does that open up with 7-Eleven and all of our other customers? And how does that open the door to really modern marketing and creative brand building, and doing some of these really fun things that we're seeing happen with NFTs and shoe drops and some other things? Then we can talk about our armored ridge top shoe drop.
I was just going to say, yeah. Tell everybody a little bit about that. I don't know if everybody's super familiar with it, but you guys launched a gym shoe, a basketball shoe.
We launched a basketball shoe, and this is
with ridges.
With ridges, it had ridges. So we have, Ruffles has ridges. Ruffles also has ridge top sneakers. So we pride ourselves in looking at consumer passion points, and one of our major passion points is sneaker culture. And so we have dabbled in that game a little bit, but I would say we really made an entrance with our Ruffles armored ridge tops that we dropped as part of the NBA playoffs, as a follow-up to our campaign that we launched with during All-Star Weekend and at the Grammys. So, this was one of those ideas that our creative agency Motive and the brand team had together. Candidly, it happened in under a week before we shot our TV spot. One of our key sayings across our cross-functional agency and internal team is, we lose nothing by exploring. So we had this idea. So we said, let's explore. Like, what if we put this sneaker on Anthony Davis? We did something really cool, because when you see the commercial, if you haven't seen it, there's a night scene, and everybody loves horses and armor and all of that. So we said, hey, can we design an armored ridge top? And so we partnered with a shoe surgeon. We designed an incredible shoe, got it made really quickly. It was an idea we explored and made happen. And then we dropped it a few months later. And so I think that mentality, again, going back into kind of selling a vision and piloting things, did we execute that shoe drop in the way that we would all have loved to have done if we had 3, 6, 12 months to plan? It wasn't during a pandemic. No, but did we do a great job? And did we have a bias for action over perfection? Absolutely, and we're really proud of it. But I think it's, again, one of those things, just keeping a pulse on the consumer landscape, the opportunities and the ideas. Because good ideas, another thing I always tell my team is, good ideas can come from anywhere. It can come from me on the brand team. Obviously, they come from our creative agencies, our media partners, can come from our innovation partners. It can come from our finance partners. Everyone that touches a brand is still a consumer. And so how do we harness that collective energy?
Yeah, no. First of all, kudos to you guys for launching a shoe that quickly. I mean, if you look back historically, you've been in brand marketing for a long time. That pivot and that decision-making tree, if you will, usually from a brand perspective, is a much longer window. So the fact that you were able to come up with the concept, design the shoe, get it out into market in that quick a period of time is just amazing, and actually put it all together. So, the fact that you were able to successfully do that in such a short turnaround time is just absolutely amazing. And I think that really, segues nicely into the next question I have for you. And that is, under the circumstances of COVID, everybody being, externally, disparate in terms of where they were and everything being virtual, and having, multiple agencies and taking these ideas from everywhere, how have you been able to navigate that? I mean, obviously very, very successfully, but what has been the reason behind that success from both a brand and a partnership standpoint? Because I know that when we were talking, for you, the partnership aspect of what you do with everybody that you work with is super important. You mentioned your creative agency, your media agency. Talk to us a little bit about that. And then also from your internal team, because I think those are two separate. You've got your partners, but then you also have to, work as a team, and, being able to make quick decisions and launch something like that is just absolutely amazing. So can you share with that a little bit with everyone?
Yeah, great
Please.
question. Great question. Honestly, teamwork and collaboration in one team. It is the only way, in my opinion, that you ever get to great work. And we say we're in the business of smiles and making magic at PepsiCo with all of our brands. And that can happen if everyone on the team doesn't have a voice. They don't have the ability and the support to voice their opinions fearlessly, et cetera. And so I think, going back to the Ridge Top example, just to build on this for a second, sometimes you have to, which it makes you uncomfortable as marketers, you have to do step one of a plan without really knowing what step 2 and step 10 are going to be. So we didn't have time to really design everything and have all of our ducks in a row, per se, when we put Anthony Davis in that sneaker in the TV spot, but we knew what we were going to do, and we had those kind of charges, if you will. So I think, the biggest thing that, my team and I have stayed true to is, like, have a plan, but staying nimble. And gosh, I mean, no truer words were ever said during the age of COVID. I could give a million examples of how we have navigated that, as I'm sure everybody here today can as well. But, make sure you have a plan when you do something, but also don't let the fact that you don't have a full plan and everything's not black and white prohibit you from taking the first step. And so I think just really having everyone get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and having that agility and resilience was really key. And the second thing I would say is just over communicate. We have all stared at Zoom and these boxes on the screen like we're doing right now, unfortunately far too often over the last year. But how do you use new communication channels? How do you continue just to keep a pulse, whether it's informal kind of what we called mugs and memes conversation on our team. We would just all grab coffee and chat and share some funny things we were seeing through social media, or carving out just more informal times just to talk about where we want the brand to go and the vision. So, I think it's having a plan, but staying nimble, I would say. I think 2, it's, over communicating. And, 3, just getting creative. We have done so many productions virtually. None of us had ever done that before. You have to navigate that, and you have to get creative. As we look at experiential, that wasn't happening. We weren't on the ground at different events. So how do you take that virtually? Just so many other different examples. But I think at times it's been difficult, but at the end of the day, I think it's made us all better marketers, better teammates. And we've really gotten to know each other more as humans and less as marketers sometimes, which gets to the best marketing, in my opinion.
No, absolutely. And before we go on a little bit, I figured I'd take a quick couple minutes and see if there was anybody that will go to Q&A. I still have a few more questions, if not, but I know everybody's passionate about their Ruffles. So, and certainly in their flavors. I just wanted to throw it out right now and see if anybody had any questions for Courtney. And if so, you can type it into the chat. If not, we'll kind of continue on, but feel free to pop those up, and I will take those as they come. So, Courtney, one of the things that with all of this is, being so exciting and being in brand marketing for so long, what's been the most rewarding aspect of relaunching Ruffles for you?
Great question. I'm going to take a little bit of a pivot from what we've been talking about, because it's actually the potential. And this is going to sound very deep for a second, but I think it's the ability to build a brand that I know can make a difference in the world. And I can't say a lot about this today because of what chapter 2 is going to be for Ruffles, but building purpose-led brands is just something I'm personally really passionate about. And I think that's one of the things this last year has really done is accelerate the need and the desire and the excitement around building purpose-led brands, because we've all taken a pause from our busy lives and everything going on in the world and taken stock personally, and I think as a society, of what matters and what's important. And so, for me, I think it just is the power of brands. I think we're hearing that from our consumers. And, I think sometimes you look at, Ruffles and other brands and other categories, and you think, well, how can these brands really make a difference in the world? But there's so much potential. And so, I would just say, for Ruffles personally, what we're laser focused on now is, just what I said, the definition of ridges. Ridges are what makes Ruffles Ruffles, and your ridges are what make you you. And as we talked about with tone, we've got some funny ways that we have introduced ridges, but we're really excited because I think ridges can be a lot deeper than just what you've seen from Ruffles so far, and the ability to use those as what we're saying internally as having your ridges be your superpower. So more to come.
That's exciting, and I know you shared a date with me. I'll let you decide if you wanted to share that, but and so forth. But we did have a question come in, which I think is a great question, and I actually have a follow-up question to this. Are there any secret flavors of Ruffles coming out soon?
Oh, great question. This is one. I mean, there's so many fun aspects of my job. This is one of my most favorite, though. What I will say to that is, and actually, I'll answer your other question. So, as well with this answer, Ruffles is the official chip of the NBA, as I mentioned, and the NBA is launching its 75th season here in about a month. And so you're going to see a lot from Ruffles during that 75th season. I will just say that. And specifically around flavors, hopefully most of you have tried our 2 chip dill flavors. So our first chip dill flavor was with Anthony Davis, lime and jalapeno, in 2020. And then in 2021, a few months ago, we launched Jason Tatum's Flamin' Hot Barbecue. So both those flavors are on pack. The flavors are delicious. We've got a lot of great content out there you can see. But I will just say on the secret flavors coming, we've had a couple chip deals. Maybe there will be more. And I think we're also, just continuing to look at we call LTOs, limited time offerings. I mean, I think if you look at the categories out there, I mean, I love just walking down the grocery store aisle and, in the age of COVID, following social media with all of what we call our snack influencers and seeing what other brands are doing. But the collaborations and the LTOs and just the exciting news at shelf, virtual shelves or in-person shelf is really exciting. So I would say, let's look at chip deal and then get excited for some LTOs and stuff.
So my follow-up question to that, Courtney, is do you ever reach out and work with consumers, or have, I know brands in the past have had consumer promotions. Do you take and have you thought of engaging consumers to come up with any new flavors?
Great question. And like I mentioned before, when we kicked off, before I worked on Ruffles, I worked on Lay's. And just a little plug for Lay's. I mean, I think Lay's has two-way consumer dialogue better than any brand that I've seen. So Lay's Do Us a Flavor, I think, was one of really the first brands to listen to consumers for a number of years and turn any idea for a potato chip onto a potato chip. So you guys have seen those flavors across the board from various places. So I think for Ruffles, we haven't really tapped into this yet, but it is definitely a priority. So stay tuned for that as well. We've got some exciting ideas on the table. But what I would say for now, for anyone that engages with Ruffles on social media, we do all sorts of community management, and we read all those ideas. So if you got ideas, put them in the chat or share them on any of our Ruffles social media accounts.
We have another question that just came in. what can a heritage brand learn from newer digital first brands when it comes to authentically marketing to Gen Z? I know from a gaming perspective, I have my own preference and insights, but from your perspective, what are you doing outside of, the NBA sponsorship to really engage Gen Z authentically?
That is such a great question. And something we think a lot about, because we have, you're always wanting to build what we call our next generation of Ruffles brand lovers, while not alienating your core consumer base. So I think we do a number of things. I think one is, again, just looking at how consumers are interacting with their brand, but also looking at how Gen Z is interacting with brands. And building a brand is very different now, as we've talked about. So I think it's media consumption. That's a big part of what we look at. And we were just talking about TikTok and all the media platforms, and the ones that don't even exist today that we're tracking on how that industry and social media and that landscape is going to migrate. So it's really just having an external perspective. I think it's the biggest thing that my team and I try to do is just always look at how other brands are growing and developing and changing. Just the consumption and the buying that's happening through social media is exploding, things like that. So it's really just having a pulse on culture, having a pulse on how consumers are interacting with our brand as well as other brands. And again, just staying nimble and being open to admitting, I don't know what I don't know, and I am not the consumer, which is another thing we say a lot. Even though we all love Ruffles, we like to say, we're not every consumer. And how do we empathize and put ourselves in their shoe?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's really interesting is that a lot of people don't realize, and I'll give a little plug for the gaming industry in general, is that consumers now are spending an equal amount of time on social media and within gaming. And I think that it's been an underutilized channel that we really see a huge opportunity for brands to reach those next generation of consumers, but also the fact of a wide spectrum up to to families and parents with children at home that are all involved in gaming. And it's so interesting that so many people don't define themselves as gamers yet spend a ton of time playing games.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And, just to build on that, Marty, too, I think it goes back to, knowing your consumer. We were talking about, gaming's been on the rise for a decade plus now, but, especially over this last year, as consumers are looking to carve out small moments of joy and small moments of fun. And that's something we're looking at. Ruffles has partnered with NBA 2K for
Right.
a while now. And how do we authentically integrate within gaming and those platforms, like you talked about as well. And
Yeah.
I think that's really the key with changing everything from the media landscape to consumer landscape is what is the authentic way that your brand can engage in gaming and some new verticals, because it's very different how Ruffles should be showing up in those new areas versus a brand that's just launching. And how do we stay true to that?
Yeah, it's got to be genuine and authentic. And I think if anything, that the Gen Z population and consumer authenticity is more important than ever. And you can definitely fall flat on your face if you do not do it right, and they will let you know.
Completely. And which also ties back to what we were talking about purpose-led brands and building brands with purpose. Because, again, consumers want to have fun, but they also want to make sure that the brands they're interacting with share their values. And so, again, how do you do everything that you do in a very authentic way?
And I think you touched on this a little earlier when in a couple minutes ago, but maybe I missed it specifically. But I think one of the things that we talked about was how you'd like to see Ruffles make a difference in the new world that we're living in. Is there correct me if I'm wrong, did you just talk about that, or was there something that specifically that you think Ruffles can make a bigger difference in the world we're living in?
Yeah. I talked about it a little bit
I thought I remember you talking a little bit about it, but I know it was something that you wanted to talk about. So I didn't know if you had fully expanded on that. So I thought I'd give you a chance to expand.
No, it's perfect. We've hit on so many great topics today. You're going to see us do more in the terms of, again, ridges are what makes Ruffles Ruffles and what make you you. And so I think we all have those things that make us unique. They make us different, whether they're visible or invisible. And again, how are we going to define ridges to mean more, and what's our role that we can play? And, I would just say, it's a personal passion of mine as well. I mean, we are brands that are the fabric of culture, and we pride ourselves at Ruffles. Like I mentioned, we have a culture council. We are deeply ingrained in consumer behavior, what's going on in the world, and what is a need that we can fill authentically. And again, marketers dream. Like, we have a product attribute that can mean more, and so really excited because I just feel like the potential of this brand to make a difference, as well as to be a brand that consumers just have a lot more fun with. Both parts are there. And I think what gets me really excited is I think you can do both at the same time. And I think too often people want to lump brands into, oh, it's a fun brand, or, oh, it's a purpose-driven brand. And I think if you stay true to the consumer and put the consumer first, you can do both. And so that's what you're going to see from Ruffles.
I mean, listen, I love the direction that you're taking that we all have ridges, because I think in today's society that is more relevant than ever before about it. Consumers in general are so focused on who they are as it represents into the world, and how do you combine their own self-worth from that perspective and tie that in with a brand message. So I really kudos to you. I think that's just a great way to approach that. We're getting close to time, and I just thought I'd ask if there's anybody else that has any other questions. Please feel free to ask them in the Q&A, and Courtney will be more than happy to answer those. Here we have another one. How do you balance? And I don't know if you guys have done a lot from an influencer standpoint, but how do you balance the macro influencer campaigns versus micro influencers? Like, for example, what roles do each of those type of influencers play? Getting back to, everybody's got ridges. I think with social media now, you can go down a rabbit hole into a very niche audience if you're not too careful. But at the same time, there's so many niche audiences because everybody has their own personality and their own style of what they are to the world. So how do you balance that from a brand perspective?
That is a great question. So a couple things we think about. There is the overarching kind of brand message, and what we're focused on now is own your ridges and signing ridges. And so you see from a distribution standpoint, we've got linear TV and we've got some big platforms, but we also have what we call, our brand passion points. So we have gaming and we have sneakers, we have a couple of others. And I think within those audiences and within those passions are audiences that are more niche. And so that's where we really look to engage kind of the micro influencers with those passion points, because those are smaller audiences. And then use kind of influencers with, let's call it just a larger social following for our overall equity brand message. But candidly, that's something we're looking at. And how do we interchange those? Because they don't have to be so segmented and so siloed. But again, great question, and something that I think is really important, and it's only going to continue to increase as we just candidly see the influencer landscape continue